The moment Miles Jensen stepped onto the pristine marble floors of the Balinese luxury resort, he knew it would be a problem. Not the resort itself, no. The Nyala Paradise Resort was everything the corporate travel agent had promised, and more. The problem was that he actually liked it, and Miles Jensen didn't have time to enjoy five-star accommodations when he had an empire to run. "Welcome to Nyala Paradise, Mr. Jensen," said a melodic voice that pulled his attention from the soaring bamboo ceiling and cascading tropical flowers. "I'm Valerie Ashton, the resort manager. We're delighted to host you during the Pacific Rim Business Summit." Miles looked down from the architectural wonder above him and found himself momentarily speechless. The woman before him extended her hand with confidence that matched her warm smile. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional twist that somehow managed to look both businesslike and perfectly suited to the tropical setting. "Thank you for the welcome," he managed, taking her hand. Her grip was firm but not aggressive, a handshake that said she knew her worth. "Impressive place you've got here. We try to blend luxury with authentic Balinese culture," Valerie said, gesturing to the intricate wood carvings adorning the walls. "Let me personally show you to your villa. I understand you're one of our VIP summit speakers." Miles nodded, surprised by the personal attention. "My assistant usually handles the check-in details." "Your assistant has been efficiently managing your scheduling requests," Valerie said with a knowing smile as they walked through the open-air corridor. "He's made it abundantly clear that your time is extremely valuable and that we should, how did he phrase it? Minimize unnecessary interactions. But I believe in personally welcoming guests who will be with us for 2 weeks, especially when they're sharing their expertise with our summit attendees." Miles felt a twinge of embarrassment. Ryan, his executive assistant, was notorious for his protective gatekeeping. "Ryan can be thorough, a valuable quality in an assistant," Valerie replied diplomatically. "Though I hope you'll find some time to experience what Bali has to offer beyond the conference rooms." They reached a private villa nestled among flowering trees and overlooking the Indian Ocean. As Valerie opened the doors, Miles was struck by the seamless blend of luxury and nature, floor-to-ceiling windows, hand-carved furniture, and a private infinity pool that seemed to pour directly into the sea. "This is the Ocean Serenity Villa," she explained, walking him through the spacious rooms. "We've prepared it with the workspace you requested, but I also took the liberty of including our wellness package. Conference days can be draining." Miles raised an eyebrow. "Wellness package, nothing that will interfere with your schedule," she assured him, opening the doors to the terrace. "Just some local herbal teas, traditional Balinese wellness amenities, and priority scheduling should you decide to use our spa facilities. I appreciate the thought, but I doubt I'll have time." Valerie smiled, and Miles couldn't help noticing how her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, the kind of smile that came from genuine enjoyment rather than professional obligation. "The summit schedule does look demanding," she acknowledged, handing him an intricately carved wooden box containing his room key and resort information. "But sometimes the most productive business decisions happen when we allow ourselves moments to breathe." Something about her quiet confidence made Miles pause rather than dismiss her comment outright. In his 15 years building Jensen Innovations from a tech startup to a global corporation, he'd heard plenty of well-meaning advice about work-life balance. Most of it he filed under luxury beliefs for those who don't understand real success. "I'll keep that in mind," he said, not entirely meaning it. "Please do. And please don't hesitate to contact me directly if you need anything during your stay." She handed him a business card with her personal contact information. "The opening reception begins at 7 in the Lotus Pavilion. Will you need anything else before then?" Miles shook his head, already reaching for his phone where he could see emails accumulating. "This is perfect, thank you." After she left, Miles immediately settled at the workspace and opened his laptop. 2 hours later, he realized he'd positioned his chair to face the ocean view rather than the wall, something he never would have done in his minimalist office back in Seattle. The opening reception was exactly what Miles expected, a carefully orchestrated networking event with the perfect balance of local culture, gourmet food, and strategic introductions. What he didn't expect was to find himself repeatedly scanning the room for the resort manager. He spotted her near the entrance, seamlessly handling what appeared to be a minor catering crisis while simultaneously greeting late-arriving guests. She wore a deep blue dress that complemented the resort's color scheme, looking both professional and elegantly appropriate for the tropical setting. "She runs this place like a symphony conductor," said a voice beside him. Miles turned to find Deanne Keller, CEO of a major retail chain and fellow speaker at the summit. "Seems that way," Miles agreed, taking a sip of his drink. "Valerie's reputation in the luxury hospitality industry is stellar," Deanne continued. "She could be running any high-end property in the world, but she specifically chose to develop this place. Apparently, she has some personal connection to Bali." Miles found himself unreasonably interested in this information. "Is that right, MMM? I tried to headhunt her for our hospitality division last year." Deanne gave him a knowing look. She wasn't interested, said something about having found the place where business and purpose intersect. Before Miles could respond, the evening's formal program began. Throughout the welcome speeches, his attention kept drifting to Valerie, noting how staff seemed to gravitate toward her for guidance, but never with panic, the mark of a leader who inspired competence rather than fear. The next morning, Miles rose early, as was his habit. The summit's first session wasn't until 9, so he decided to take his coffee on the villa's terrace. The sun was just rising over the ocean, painting the sky in colors that made him wish for the first time in years that he had some artistic talent to capture the moment. Beautiful, isn't it? Miles turned to find Valerie on the path near his villa, dressed in running clothes, a light sheen of sweat suggesting she'd been exercising. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said quickly. "I run this path every morning, and I wasn't expecting to see any guests up so early." "No intrusion," Miles said, surprised to mean it. "Would you like some coffee? The villa seems to be stocked with enough for a small army." Something like surprise flickered across her face before she smiled. "I have just enough time before I need to shower and transform back into management mode." "Thank you." Minutes later, they sat with steaming cups looking out over the ocean. "Do you run every morning?" Miles asked. "5 days a week. It's my thinking time before the day gets chaotic." She took a sip of coffee. "What gets you up at dawn, work, emails, or habit?" "Both," Miles admitted. "Though I haven't actually checked my phone yet this morning, which might be a personal record." Valerie laughed, and Miles found himself smiling in response. "The summit agenda looks interesting today," she commented. "You're speaking about sustainable tech development." Miles nodded, impressed that she knew the details. "It's become something of a passion project, green technology with practical applications rather than just theoretical benefits." "I'd like to hear more about that," she said, checking her watch. "But unfortunately, I need to get back." "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Jensen." "Miles," he corrected automatically. "Miles," she acknowledged with a nod. "Enjoy your day of innovative discussions. If you need a break from solving global problems, the sunset from Puritana Lot Temple is worth seeing. We can arrange transportation." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving Miles with the strange sensation that his meticulously planned conference schedule suddenly seemed less appealing than it had the day before. The summit's first day passed in a blur of presentations, panel discussions, and strategic networking. Miles' keynote speech on sustainable technology innovation was well received, generating exactly the kind of industry connections he'd come to establish. By evening, he had 3 potential partnership meetings scheduled and a dinner with investors who were interested in Jensen Innovation's new environmental impact initiative. He didn't see Valerie again until the following afternoon when he returned to his villa between sessions to take an urgent video call. The connection kept dropping in the main conference center, and he found himself grateful for the private workspace in his villa. As he finished the call and stepped onto the terrace to clear his mind, he noticed Valerie speaking with a group of staff near the garden path. She was gesturing toward some of the landscaping, clearly explaining something with passion. Even from a distance, her enthusiasm was evident. Almost as if sensing his observation, she looked up and gave a small wave before returning to her staff discussion. Miles waved back, feeling oddly like he'd been caught doing something improper by simply watching her work. That evening, after declining 3 different dinner invitations from fellow executives, Miles found himself asking the concierge about transportation to Tana Lot Temple. "For the sunset, sir," the young man asked. "Excellent choice. We have a private car available in 30 minutes if that suits your schedule." Miles nodded, wondering why he was suddenly prioritizing sightseeing over business networking. He couldn't remember the last time he'd played tourist anywhere. The temple was more spectacular than he'd anticipated, an ancient structure perched on a rock formation in the sea, accessible only during low tide. Miles found himself mesmerized by the centuries of history, the spiritual significance that the guide explained, and the sheer natural beauty as the sun began its descent. It puts business problems into perspective, doesn't it? Miles turned to find Valerie standing nearby, watching the same sunset. She wore a simple white dress with a colorful Balinese scarf draped over her shoulders. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, genuinely surprised. "I come at least once a month," she explained. "It's where I reconnect with why I chose Bali." She hesitated, then added, "I hope you don't mind the coincidence. If you'd prefer private contemplation—" "Not at all," Miles interrupted, surprising himself with his eagerness for company, specifically her company. "Though I admit I'm curious what brought the resort manager to the same tourist spot as a guest on the same evening." Valerie laughed. "Pure coincidence, I promise. Though I did mention it to you, so perhaps it was subconsciously on my mind when I felt the need to escape the resort for a few hours." "You need to escape your own resort. Even paradise needs perspective sometimes," she said with a smile that suggested deeper meaning. "Are you enjoying the summit so far?" Miles considered the question more carefully than he might have a few days ago. "It's productive." "The connections are valuable, but," she prompted. "But I find myself thinking about things beyond the next quarter's projections," he admitted. "It might be the setting." They walked along the shoreline as the sun continued its spectacular descent, painting the sky in impossible colors. Valerie pointed out details about the temple and shared stories about Balinese culture with the kind of intimate knowledge that only comes from deep personal connection. "You said you chose Bali," Miles said as they watched the final sliver of sun disappear. "What's the story there?" Valerie was quiet for a moment. "I studied abroad here in college hospitality management with a minor in cultural anthropology. Something about this island resonated with me in a way nowhere else has. After working for major luxury hotel chains in 5 countries, I got the opportunity to develop this property. It was a chance to create something that honors both the culture and the environment while still delivering world-class luxury." "That's why you wouldn't work for Deanne Keller," Miles said without thinking. Valerie raised an eyebrow. "You've been discussing me with other CEOs." Miles felt uncharacteristically flustered. "She mentioned trying to recruit you. It came up naturally in conversation." "I'm sure it did," Valerie said with amusement. "Deanne makes a compelling offer every time she visits, but I've built something special at Nyala. It's more than a job." As darkness fell completely, they walked back to the resort's waiting car. The conversation flowed easily, shifting between business philosophy, travel experiences, and personal anecdotes that Miles found himself sharing more freely than he had with anyone in recent memory. Back at the resort, Miles impulsively asked if she would join him for dinner. "I wish I could," Valerie said with what seemed like genuine regret, "but I have a staff situation that needs attention tonight. Perhaps another evening." Miles nodded, surprised by his disappointment. "I'd like that." The next few days established a pattern. Miles attended his required summit sessions, made the connections he'd come to make, but increasingly found himself looking forward to the moments when he would encounter Valerie morning coffee on his terrace, when she finished her run, brief conversations in the resort's gardens. And once, an impromptu lunch when they found themselves alone in the resort's smaller restaurant during off-peak hours. Each interaction revealed another layer of who she was: intelligent, principled, funny in an understated way, and possessed of a wisdom about life that made Miles increasingly aware of what his single-minded focus on business success had cost him. On the summit's fifth day, Miles was scheduled for back-to-back meetings until late evening. As he returned to his villa exhausted, he found a handwritten note had been slipped under his door. If you can escape your meetings by 9 p.m., there's a traditional Balinese dance performance in the village nearby that's not on the tourist circuit. Meet at the main entrance if interested. Miles checked his watch. 8:45. He hadn't planned anything beyond reviewing tomorrow's presentation and answering emails, but something made him hesitate. This wasn't a professional obligation. It was a personal invitation, and accepting it would mean acknowledging that whatever was developing between them went beyond professional courtesy. At 9 o'clock, he was waiting at the entrance. Valerie appeared moments later, having changed from her business attire into a casual but elegant outfit appropriate for a cultural event. "I wasn't sure you'd make it," she said, looking genuinely pleased. "Neither was I," Miles admitted. "But I've discovered that Bali has a way of adjusting priorities." The dance performance was held in a small community center in a nearby village. They were the only obvious foreigners present, and Miles found himself completely absorbed in the elaborate costumes, hypnotic music, and intricate movements that told stories from Balinese mythology. "The dancer with the red mask represents a demon king," Valerie whispered, leaning close enough that Miles could detect the faint scent of jasmine. "Watch how he moves. Even evil has its own kind of grace here." After the performance, they walked through the village where a small night market was still operating. Valerie greeted locals by name, introducing Miles in both English and basic Balinese phrases she encouraged him to repeat. "How long did it take you to learn the language?" he asked as they sampled local street food that Valerie insisted was safe despite its humble appearance. "I'm still learning," she admitted, "but making the effort matters here. People appreciate that you value their culture enough to try." "Is that your secret?" Miles asked, watching as she exchanged a few words with an elderly woman selling hand-woven textiles. "The way everyone responds to you, it's more than just respecting the boss." Valerie considered the question seriously. "I believe that luxury isn't just about thread counts and premium amenities. It's about creating genuine human connections. That requires understanding the place and people you're working with." "That philosophy seems to be working well for you," Miles observed. "The resort runs like clockwork, but it doesn't feel corporate or sterile." "That's the highest compliment you could give," she said with a smile that made Miles suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. For a moment he thought he might lean in, but a group of laughing children ran between them, breaking the moment. The walk back to the resort was quiet but comfortable. At the entrance, Miles hesitated. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said finally. "It's not something I would have found in the conference program." "Thank you for being interested," Valerie replied. "Most executives stick to the prescribed tourist experiences if they venture out at all. I'm finding that the unexpected experiences are the most valuable part of this trip," Miles said, holding her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Miles," she said softly before turning toward her own quarters. "Good night, Valerie." The next morning, Miles woke early and went for a run along the same path where he often encountered Valerie. Sure enough, about 15 minutes in, he spotted her coming from the opposite direction. "Are you stalking me, Mr. Jensen?" she called with a teasing smile as they both slowed to a stop. "Just taking some wellness advice about finding time to breathe," he replied, matching her playful tone. They fell into step together, conversation flowing easily despite the exertion. When they reached a particularly scenic overlook, they paused to catch their breath and take in the view. "I've been thinking," Miles said after a comfortable silence. "The summit ends in a week, but I've been considering extending my stay for a few days." Would the ocean serenity villa happen to be available? Valerie studied him with a mixture of surprise and something else, pleasure, perhaps, or caution. I believe it could be arranged. Any particular reason for the extension? Miles looked out at the ocean, then back at her. I think I need a little more Bali in my life before returning to Seattle's constant rain and board meetings. Just a little more Bali, she asked, her tone light but her eyes searching. Well, there's this resort manager who's been showing me that there's more to success than quarterly reports, he admitted. I might need a few more days of her influence before I can face my executive team. Valerie's smile was worth the moment of vulnerability. I'm sure she'd be happy to continue the educational process. The next few days developed a rhythm. Summit activities during the day, where Miles found himself more engaged and less distracted by his phone than usual, followed by evenings exploring Bali with Valerie. They visited local villages, hiked to hidden waterfalls, and once spent an entire evening at a traditional night market, sampling food and watching local artisans at work. As the professional boundaries between them softened, Miles found himself sharing things he rarely discussed: his difficult relationship with his father, the early struggles building his company, even his growing concern that success had come at the cost of any real personal connections. In return, Valerie revealed her own journey, a childhood moving between military bases with her father's deployments, her determination to build something lasting, and the leap of faith it had taken to leave a prestigious position with a global hotel chain to develop the Nyala resort. It was terrifying, she admitted as they sat on the beach one evening after dinner. I had offers from properties in London, New York, Singapore, places that would have been safer career moves. What made you choose this place instead? Miles asked, watching how the moonlight illuminated her profile. I kept asking myself what success really meant, she said thoughtfully. Was it a bigger title, more money, or was it creating something meaningful, something that honored this place that had changed my perspective on everything? She turned to face him directly. What about you? What does success look like for Jensen Innovations in 5 years? The question made Miles pause. A week ago, he would have had a ready answer about market share, technological advances, and profit margins. Now he found himself considering a different metric. Honestly, I'm not sure anymore, he admitted. I came here with very clear goals for expansion into the Asian market, but I'm beginning to think I need to reevaluate what growth really means for the company and for me personally. That sounds like a healthy reassessment, Valerie said, her hand resting just inches from his on the sand. Miles closed the distance, covering her hand with his. It's your fault, you know, you've been a disruptive influence. Is that a complaint from the innovation expert? She asked, her voice softer as she turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. It's an observation, Miles replied, suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting. A rather life-altering one. The kiss, when it finally happened, felt like the natural conclusion to a conversation they'd been having since they met, tentative at first, then deepening with a certainty that surprised them both. When they eventually pulled apart, Valerie rested her forehead against his. This complicates things. I'm good with complicated, Miles said, bringing his hand up to trace the curve of her cheek. Are you? She challenged gently. Your life is in Seattle, mine is here. That's more than complicated, it's practically impossible. I'm a problem solver by profession, Miles said, kissing her again briefly. And some problems are worth solving, no matter how difficult. The summit's closing days took on a dreamlike quality. Miles participated in his scheduled events with his usual professionalism, but his mind frequently drifted to Valerie and the evenings they now spent together. They tried to maintain discretion at the resort, keeping their professional interactions appropriately formal, but in private, they were exploring the rapidly deepening connection between them. The night before the summit's final gala, they had dinner in Miles' villa, served by resort staff who maintained professional composure despite the obvious personal nature of the evening. Have you thought any more about what happens after you leave? Valerie asked as they sat on the terrace after dinner, the sounds of the ocean providing a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Miles took her hand. I've been thinking about little else, actually. And and I think we should give this a chance, he said decisively. I'm not willing to walk away just because of geography. Long-distance relationships are difficult under the best circumstances, Valerie pointed out. Add in your CEO schedule and my responsibilities here. Which is why I've been exploring some options, Miles said. Jensen Innovations has been considering an Asia-Pacific headquarters for years. Singapore was the frontrunner, but Indonesia has distinct advantages. Valerie looked skeptical. You're not suggesting relocating your company's regional headquarters because of me. Not because of you, Miles clarified. But you've helped me see Bali differently. There's a growing tech sector here, investment opportunities that align with our sustainability goals, and tax incentives that make business sense. So you're saying it's a happy coincidence that a regional office might bring you back to Bali regularly? Extremely happy, Miles agreed, pulling her closer. Plus, I've discovered I work quite effectively remotely with the right setting. This sounds suspiciously like you've been making plans, Valerie said, though her smile suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. Preliminary investigations, Miles corrected. I am a businessman, after all. A businessman who suddenly wants to spend significant time in Bali. A businessman who has discovered that some things are more valuable than being in the office 7 days a week, Miles said, his tone growing more serious. I've built a company I'm proud of, Valerie, but this week has shown me what I've been missing by making it the only focus in my life. The summit's final gala was a glittering affair, celebrating successful connections made and partnerships formed. Miles found his attention constantly drawn to Valerie as she moved through the event, managing last-minute details while graciously interacting with departing executives. You're not very subtle, Jensen, Deanne Keller commented as she joined him at his table. Half the room has noticed you tracking the resort manager's movements. Miles shrugged, beyond caring about appearances, just appreciating excellent hospitality management. Deanne laughed. Is that what they're calling it these days? Well, for what it's worth, I approve. She's brilliant, and you've seemed more human this week than I've seen you in years. I'll take that as a compliment, you should. Deanne raised her glass in a small toast to whatever comes next. The evening wound down, guests gradually retiring to pack for early departures. As the last attendees left the ballroom, Miles found Valerie speaking with her staff, giving final instructions for the evening. May I steal the manager for a moment? He asked as the staff dispersed. Officially, I should be making sure everything's in order for tomorrow's departures, Valerie said, but she made no move to leave. Officially, I should be preparing for my 8 a.m. flight, Miles countered, but I'd rather spend my last night in Bali walking on the beach with you. They walked along the moonlit shore, shoes in hand, the warm water occasionally washing over their feet. I've been thinking about what you said, Valerie said eventually, about finding a way to make this work. And I think I'd like to try, she said, stopping to face him. It won't be easy. I have commitments here, a life I've built. I wouldn't want you to give that up, Miles said sincerely. What you've created at Nyala is extraordinary. But, she prompted. But I also think what's happening between us could be extraordinary if we give it a chance, he said, taking both her hands in his. I'm willing to make changes, find compromises. The question is whether you're willing to take that risk with me. Valerie studied him in the moonlight. This isn't just vacation romance talking. The CEO won't get back to Seattle and get swallowed by board meetings and forget about the resort manager in Bali. Not a chance, Miles said firmly. You've changed something fundamental, Valerie. I can't go back to being the person who arrived here 2 weeks ago. Good, she said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Because I've grown rather attached to the person you are now. Miles pulled her close, kissing her with all the emotion that had been building since they met. So we're doing this, finding a way forward together. We're doing this, Valerie confirmed. Though I should warn you, I'm quite stubborn once I commit to something. That makes 2 of us, Miles said with a smile, which means the odds are in our favor. Miles did not board his scheduled flight the next morning. Instead, he extended his stay for another week, working remotely from his villa while exploring the island more thoroughly with Valerie during her off hours. They visited temples hidden in mountain forests, swam in sacred springs, and spent long evenings planning how they might bridge the distance between their worlds. 3 months later, Jensen Innovations announced the establishment of its Asia-Pacific Sustainability Headquarters in Bali, with a focus on developing environmental technologies suited to the region. Business publications speculated about the unusual choice of location, with some industry insiders noting that CEO Miles Jensen had been spending an unusual amount of time on the Indonesian island since a business summit earlier in the year. 6 months after that, the business world was treated to photographs of a beachside wedding at an exclusive Balinese resort, where Miles Jensen married Valerie Ashton in a ceremony that blended Western traditions with Balinese customs. Guests included global business leaders alongside local villagers who had become Valerie's extended family. Under a canopy of fragrant flowers, with the sound of the ocean as their backdrop, they exchanged vows to build a shared life that honored both their individual passions and their commitment to each other. "I came to Bali for a business conference," Miles said as part of his vows, "but I'm staying for love. You showed me that true success isn't measured in quarterly reports but in moments of genuine connection. Thank you for making me want to stay forever." Valerie's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded, "And I built a resort to welcome the world to the place I love, never expecting that the most important guest would be the one who found his way not just to Bali, but to my heart." 1 year later, Miles could often be found working from a private office at the Nyala Paradise Resort when not traveling to Jensen Innovations' global offices. The company's new sustainability initiatives, inspired by Balinese conservation practices, were revolutionizing the industry, while the regional headquarters had created hundreds of local jobs. And if industry insiders noticed that the formerly workaholic CEO now insisted on blocking time for evening beach walks with his wife and weekend explorations of their adopted island home, they also couldn't help but notice that both Jensen Innovations and the Nyala Paradise Resort were thriving under the partnership of two people who had discovered that the greatest innovation of all might be finding balance between ambition and love. When their daughter was born the following year, they named her Ayu, a Balinese name meaning beautiful life, which was exactly what they had created together, beginning with a chance meeting between a CEO and a resort manager who made him want to stay forever.